When a person disappears, it is crucial to examine all clues very carefully and determine whether someone may have left voluntarily or is in unexpected danger. Investigators often look at these clues not just once or twice, but many times, until something finally stands out or becomes clear that was previously hidden. But there are also cases like that of Kristen Modafferi, cases without clues. Until a man calls the editorial office of a television station. He says he knows exactly what happened to Kristen and who is to blame. But what if the informant is just trying to distract attention from himself? Or even betraying himself by making the call?
The possible scenarios are hundreds, if not thousands, of scenarios of things that could have happened to her.
What do you think happened to your daughter?
Kristen Modafferi's birthday is a very special day. Not only because she finally comes of age on this day, but also because on this day she boards a plane in her home state of North Carolina that will take her to California to her new home. Kristen has always been hardworking throughout her life. As a teenager, she skipped a grade and her good grades even earned her a scholarship. This gives her the opportunity to study for 4 years at North Carolina State University. Because she skipped a grade, Kristen has already completed her first year at university. By the time she is 18, she enjoyed it very much. But now Kristen wants to finally use her free summer for herself. To do something she's always wanted to try, her very own little adventure. Kristen wants to take a photography course at UC Berkeley. The university offers summer courses for interested students. Kristen paid the $900 tuition fee out of her own pocket. To supplement her budget for excursions and shopping in California, she wants to work part-time, preferably in a cozy cafe. That's the plan. So on June 1st, 1997, Kristen boards a plane to San Francisco. Kristen took care of planning her summer stay all by herself. She found a temporary room in a shared apartment in the city of Oakland on Craigslist. And the shared apartment in Oakland is just perfect for Kristen. She can reach UC Berkeley in just 20 minutes by train. What's more, Oakland is located on the east coast of the San Francisco metropolitan area, and the 18-year-old already knows San Francisco a little bit. 3 years ago, she spent her summer vacation there with her family. Kristen really enjoyed it there, and living near this city for the summer, attending a course at Berkeley and making new friends on the side must be the 18-year-old's idea of the perfect summer. And her 18th birthday is the starting signal for this promising time. Kristen shares the apartment in Oakland with a few other people. Everyone has their own rhythm, and there is always a lot of coming and going at 274 Jane Avenue. Kristen quickly settles in and finds her way around California. So, well, in fact, that within just a few days she has already landed her dream summer job. Just as she had hoped, she finds work in a cafe called Spinelli's. The branch is located in the Crocker Galleria, a shopping center in San Francisco. Kristen quickly develops a routine in her temporary home. The course at UC Berkeley doesn't start until June 24th. So Kristen has a full 3 weeks to settle in, earn some money, and see San Francisco. In the morning, she wakes up in her shared apartment in Oakland, then takes the train from 19th Street to San Francisco and starts work at Spinelli's at 7 a.m. After work at 3 p.m., Kristen usually sets off to explore the city. During these weeks, Kristen soaks up everything she can culturally. She seems to really blossom during her adventure. One evening, she goes all by herself to a big festival called Live 105. Among others, the British rock band Blur and the musician Fiona Apple are playing. Kristen has so much fun there that she misses the last train to Oakland. In her desperation, Kristen shares a taxi with a young man she met at the festival and spends the night at his home in San Francisco. From there, she goes straight to Spinelli's the next morning. Things could have gone badly if the stranger had had bad intentions. Kristen's mother herself says that despite her maturity and intelligence, her daughter was still a little naive at times. In the end, she was just a normal 18-year-old, traveling alone in the world for the first time. But in the end, it wasn't this encounter that led to Kristen's disappearance, but a normal day that ended in disaster. Actually, everything is running as usual on June 23, 1997. Kristen has been in California for 3 weeks now and seems to be having the time of her life. And the next day, the photography course in Berkeley finally starts. But first, she has to go to work at Spinelli's. So Kristen gets up early in the morning, takes the train to San Francisco, and starts her 7 a.m. shift at Spinelli's. The workday is also uneventful. Kristen makes coffee, takes care of her customers, and chats with her coworkers in between. Some of them later remember Kristen asking how to get from the shopping center to Land's End Beach. It's unclear whether she definitely wanted to go there after work or was just toying with the idea. In any case, Kristen finishes work on time at 3 p.m. and says goodbye to her colleagues. At around 3:30 p.m., one of Kristen's colleagues walks through the shopping center. On the second floor, she thinks she sees Kristen talking to a blonde woman. The colleague is certain that it was Kristen she saw. She thought it was strange that Kristen was still hanging around the Crocker Galleria after work. She usually leaves as soon as she finishes work. The colleague did not recognize the blonde woman she claims to have seen with Kristen. This is the last time anyone sees Kristen Modafferi. After that, she disappears, although unfortunately no one notices right away. Kristen has her routine in California, but she's also new. Her co-workers, roommates, and fellow students don't know her very well yet. When Kristen doesn't show up for her photography class the next day, June 24th, the instructor notices, but it's also the first day. No one can know whether Kristen is simply playing hooky, has fallen ill, has spontaneously dropped out of the course, or whatever. Unlike today, at the end of the 90s, you don't just send a message via cell phone to ask at UC Berkeley. It is assumed that Kristen is simply absent this Tuesday and that she will come to the next class or formally withdraw in the next few days. But neither happens. On June 26th, Kristen's father leaves a message for his daughter on the answering machine of the shared apartment. Only then does one of the 4 roommates contact Kristen's parents in North Carolina to let them know that Kristen has not come home since Monday. Kristen's mother, in particular, is immediately very concerned. If it had been up to her, her daughter would not have traveled to California in the first place. She thought the big trip was too adventurous from the start. Before Kristen left, her father reassured his wife that Kristen would be fine and would ultimately grow from the experience. And now, exactly what Kristen's mother feared so much has happened. Her daughter is on the other side of the country, more than 4,000 kilometers away from her family, and cannot be reached. The Modafferis immediately board the first plane to San Francisco to report their daughter missing. But that's not enough for them, because they arrive on a Friday afternoon. And as trivial as it may sound, that means it's the weekend, even at the police station. And because Kristen is 18 years old and therefore an adult, she is free to decide where she wants to stay. For the police, there is no reason to believe that Kristen has simply gone somewhere, on a trip, a short getaway, or to completely escape her old life. Therefore, the case is not prioritized and will not be dealt with until the following Monday. That is June 30th, and a week has passed since Kristen's disappearance. Of course, her parents are not satisfied with this. So on Friday evening, the family hires a private investigator to help with the search. And the Modafferis also take action themselves. Kristen's parents have thousands of flyers printed with Kristen's photo on them. Together with Kristen's 3 sisters, they take to the streets of San Francisco to distribute the flyers. Even Kristen's 7-year-old little sister is helping. They hope that someone will recognize Kristen and know where she might have been since June 23rd. investigators find what is perhaps one of the most important clues in Kristen's shared apartment. There, they discover a copy of the San Francisco Bay Guardian newspaper. The page with the personal ads is open, and one of the ads has been circled in red pen. The personal ad reads, "Friends. Woman seeks friends for shared activities who enjoy music, photography, sports, walks, coffee, or trips to the beach to explore the Bay Area. If interested, please call." A telephone code is provided. Code numbers are still used for such personal ads today. The person placing the ad does not have to give their own phone number. If you like the ad, you dial the code number instead, which connects you to the editorial office. The editorial office then forwards the call via an intermediate number. The ad in the Bay Guardian sounds exactly like Kristen. So much so that you could almost think she wrote it herself. If not, then it's definitely an ad that would have caught Kristen's attention. After all, Kristen circled it in red for one reason or another, and as you probably remember, a co-worker believes she saw Kristen with an unknown blonde woman at the mall on the afternoon of June 23rd. What's more, she asked the colleague for directions to a specific section of the beach, and the personal ad highlights trips to the beach and exploring the area. This personal ad could therefore be a pretty important lead. That's why the police immediately contact the San Francisco Bay Guardian. The problem, however, is that when the request comes in, the phone number for this ad has already expired. The newspaper's editorial office has completely deleted the ad data for this issue. This means that it is impossible to trace who placed the ad or who responded to it. The promising lead thus turns into a dead end. A search with a tracking dog provides a little more information. The dog is given some of Kristen's personal belongings as a reference and is then taken to the Crocker Galleria, where Kristen was last seen. The dog picks up a scent there. The tracking dog leads the police officers out of the shopping center and down Geary Street toward Tenderloin. This fits with the statements made by Kristen's colleagues, because bus line 38 runs from Geary Street to Land's End. And that is exactly the stretch of beach that Kristen asked her colleagues about. The strange thing is that Kristen already knew this stretch of beach. Just 2 days before her disappearance, on June 21st, she attended a party at Land's End investigators. Find it strange that Kristen would have asked for directions again on June 23rd. However, it may also be that Kristen was simply unsure how exactly to get there by public transportation. As mentioned, the case took place in the 90s, long before Google Maps existed and you could check which bus line to take. Based on the dog's trail, investigators believe it is likely that Kristen took the bus to Land's End on the afternoon of her disappearance, but they don't get much further than that. On July 10th, a regional television station reporting directly from San Francisco receives an anonymous call. It contains a concrete tip about the Kristen Modafferi case. A man calls and claims to know what happened to the 18-year-old. Kristen got caught up in a deadly love triangle. He says, and I quote, "Two jealous lesbians murdered 18-year-old Kristen in a car." He also gives the exact location of the crime scene. The whole thing allegedly took place on Market Street near the Tower Records record store. The two alleged murderers then dumped Kristen's body in the river from a wooden bridge in Marin County. The caller also gives the names of the two women he accuses. The police are able to locate the two women. They work for the YMCA in San Francisco. The YMCA is an organization that offers programs for education, recreation, health, and social participation. It caters to people of all ages and backgrounds and primarily supports children, young people, and families with various activities, courses, and volunteer opportunities. If you're now wondering why two employees of such an organization would have murdered Kristen, well, the police are wondering that too. The two women are questioned, but the police see absolutely no evidence that they really had anything to do with the 18-year-old's disappearance. The suspicion against them is cleared up. What is much more exciting for the police now is who the anonymous caller to the TV station was and why he allegedly wanted to denigrate the two women, and the police quickly find what they are looking for. The police can trace the call. It was made from a residential building located very close to the Crocker Galleria, where Kristen worked. The caller is a 36-year-old man named John Onuma. When confronted by the police about his anonymous call, he initially denies it. Then he admits that he was indeed the one who called the TV station.
They recorded the conversation. First, Onuma denied any knowledge of Kristen's disappearance.
Young lady by the name of Kristen Modafferi. Don't know anything about it. Do you know anything about her? Nope. Yeah, let's just cut it. I got nothing to do with her. I already called and I told the guy. Absolutely.
The two women John Onuma accused are no strangers to him. The two falsely accused women are colleagues of John's former girlfriend, Jill Lampo. So John calls the TV station and accuses two of his girlfriend Jill's colleagues of murdering Kristen Modafferi. The probable reason for this is simple. Allegedly, the two colleagues tried to get Jill fired from her job. John wanted to take revenge on their behalf. There is also a connection between Jill and Kristen through several intermediaries. It seems far-fetched, but for the sake of completeness, it should be mentioned here. Before Jill got together with John, she had just broken up with her previous partner, a man named Matthew. Matthew, in turn, was a good friend of Caddy's, a colleague with whom Kristen worked at Spinelli's. After Kristen's disappearance, Matthew is also said to have started working at Spinelli's at some point. But to me, personally, this really sounds more like a coincidence. However, an amateur investigator once tried to contact Matthew. But when the amateur investigator mentioned the name Kristen Modafferi on the phone, Matthew allegedly told him never to call him again. That could be considered suspicious. But you could also consider that a stranger is calling someone who is not a professional police officer or investigator and suddenly asking them about a missing person case. Overall, this connection between John and Kristen seems rather far-fetched. But if you see it differently, feel free to write that in the comments. I'm curious to hear your opinion. But back to John and his anonymous call to the TV station. The investigators can't let it go, even though it basically turned out to be a hoax. They think John's story was too specific, embellished with too many details. That perhaps not everything in this story was made up. The part about the alleged love triangle was, but the rest seems too specific to the police to have been simply pulled out of thin air, especially since a background check on John Onuma doesn't exactly speak in his favor. Several women have come forward to the police claiming to have had contact with John through newspaper ads. The women report that John pressured them to sleep with him and stole from them. The victims say they did not report the incidents because they were afraid of him. In a 1999 episode of the TV show America's Most Wanted, 3 women are interviewed about their encounters with John Onuma. All 3 independently say that they were held captive and tortured by John, including being burned and deprived of sleep. One of the 3 women reports the following.
He hit me over the head with ropes and said, quote unquote, you know I'm gonna have to kill you. I can't let you go. And then he turned around and says, now you know what happened to Kristen Modafferi.
John Onuma himself denies ever having met Kristen Modafferi. He says he regrets calling the TV station. He also claims that he has taken a lie detector test and is willing to take another one at any time. When he is reached for a rare interview by ABC 7, he says, I drew attention to myself when I shouldn't have, and I messed up. I took the focus away from the investigation. There was never an arrest in the Kristen Modafferi case. John Onuma is considered a person of interest, but is not classified as a suspect. Kristen's 4 roommates are not suspected, nor is the young man she met at the music festival before her disappearance. John's girlfriend at the time, Jill, has an alibi for June 23rd and was also never suspected. At least that much is known. The police investigate in various directions and also search 17 different apartments and buildings. The basis for this is unknown. Only that none of these measures led to an arrest. The case becomes a cold case. But even in cold cases, there are always new twists and discoveries. This was also the case in 2015 in the Kristen Modafferi case. In 2015, a cadaver dog alerts to a house in the Californian city of Oakland. The dog was provided by a private organization that supports Kristen's parents free of charge. It is the house where Kristen lived for 3 weeks before her disappearance in 1997. Briefly, there is hope, even if it is not a pleasant hope. But if Kristen's body were found on the property, her family would at least have some certainty. The police immediately begin to investigate the property and even dig on the grounds. However, it all turns out to be a false lead. Unfortunately, cadaver dogs are not infallible. There is no trace of Kristen's remains on the property in Oakland. To this day, the police do not believe that Kristen returned to Oakland at all on the day of her disappearance. Nevertheless, Kristen's parents seem unable to let go of this line of inquiry. A retired police officer and forensic scientist with whom the family had contact developed a device that is supposed to detect chemicals released during human decomposition. At this point, it should be emphasized again that the man developed the device himself. It is not an approved or even standardized tool. In any case, the device apparently detects something on a concrete slab in front of the porch at 278 Janes Avenue, indicating that blood has dried at this location. It was not the house where Kristen's shared apartment was located, but a neighboring house. At the time of Kristen's disappearance, there was apparently a rehabilitation center for drug addicts there or in another neighboring house. The retired police officer claims to have taken DNA from the site and tested it. This matched Kristen's DNA. The police department responsible learns of this from the media. They state that the alleged DNA sample was never forwarded to them, even though they had requested it. The man who claims to have found this clue disputes this. This information comes from a 2017 article that has since been deleted. Perhaps because it is all very vague. There have been alleged sightings from time to time. Someone claims to have seen Kristen in a restaurant in San Francisco shortly after her disappearance. Someone else claims to have seen her in Presidio National Park. Sometimes she is seen shortly after her disappearance, sometimes a few months or even years later. But all sightings have one thing in common. They cannot be verified. The police have no credible evidence that Kristen is alive, nor that she is dead. Her credit card and social security number have never been active again since her disappearance. It is as if Kristen Modafferi has been swallowed up by the earth. To this day, more than 25 years after her disappearance, unfortunately, the video would actually end here. And we won't be able to solve the Kristen Modafferi case in the following section either. But there is some information that I haven't shared with you yet. And for good reason. Because it comes from a source that cannot be independently verified. Because the source claims to be close to Kristen's family, I'm putting this part at the end of the video. I've already told you that Kristen's family hired a private investigator. Several volunteers also helped in the search for Kristen Modafferi at the time. One of them is a man named Dennis Mahone. He is the amateur investigator I mentioned briefly earlier. However, he is not the private investigator originally hired by the Modafferis. He joined the case later on. He is also not a private investigator, but rather an amateur investigator. To this day, he maintains the website findkristen.com, where he compiles all kinds of information about the case that he has come across during his own research. It is very important to emphasize that this Dennis Mahone is the only source for the few additional details that follow. He was also featured in a major article on Kristen's disappearance. However, the article has already been taken offline. The same goes for the article about the DNA trace found on the porch of Kristen's former shared apartment, in which Dennis Mahone was also mentioned. I am not emphasizing this in order to discredit Mahone's work in any way, but simply to distinguish between the sources. As I said, Mahone's information comes only from himself and cannot be confirmed by other media reports. However, he seems certain that John Onuma and his girlfriend Jill Lampo are responsible for Kristen's disappearance. Mahone claims that a relative of Jill's contacted him. More specifically, her uncle's wife. Jill is said to have called this uncle on June 5, 2012. She had essentially had a nervous breakdown on the phone and spent over 4 hours lamenting everything that had gone wrong in her life. At some point, The uncle began taking notes during the conversation so he could follow Jill's explanations. Jill's uncle's wife then apparently forwarded these notes to Mahone. According to these notes, the uncle wrote down the following during his conversation with Jill. She got involved with a controlling man who convinced her to become an accomplice in an unspeakable kidnapping and murder. The problems with this? First, Jill doesn't mention Kristen at all. And second, this alleged statement comes secondhand. Transcribed by Jill's uncle, read by his wife, and then forwarded to Mahone. Unfortunately, it is impossible to find out whether the police know about this and, if so, how they interpret this clue. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem particularly solid to me. It is also important to mention that, in addition to the San Francisco police, the FBI was also investigating the Kristen Modafferi case at the time. As mentioned, the police consider John Onuma a person of interest. The FBI, on the other hand, has ruled him out as a suspect. So there is also disagreement among investigators about how to interpret John's call not to mention his girlfriend at the time, Jill Lampo. In fact, John Onuma only appeared on the investigators' radar because of his own false tip. If he hadn't made that call at the time, they probably would never have thought to investigate him at all. There would have been even fewer clues in this case than there already were. Kristen Modafferi's father is no longer alive. He died in 2022 as a result of leukemia. He never found out what happened to his daughter in the summer of 1997, and what became of her. Kristen's mother and her 3 sisters, on the other hand, are still searching for answers today. The case is truly mysterious. It seems as if Kristen has somehow vanished into thin air. John's phone call and the newspaper announcement from Kristen's room are the only real leads in the investigation. And yet, after more than 20 years, it is still not even clear whether these 2 things really have anything to do with her disappearance. That's why I'm now looking forward to reading your comments. Can you piece together a coherent sequence of events leading up to Kristen's disappearance from all these puzzle pieces? I'm really looking forward to reading your thoughts. If you enjoyed the video and want to support this channel, please leave a like and subscribe. Other than that, there's not much more to say. I wish you a good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you're watching the video, and I hope to see you again in the next video. Until then, ciao everyone.